Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. This episode features the DGA Special Projects Committee's recent event, The Craft of the Director, Ron Howard. The event was the fifth in this series of conversations with master filmmakers that feature an in-depth discussion about the directing process, from pre-production through post. Mr. Howard's extensive filmography includes the feature films Splash, Parenthood, Far and Away, The Da Vinci Code, and In the Heart of the Sea, the documentary features Pavarotti, The Beatles' 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, and Made in America, and the pilot of the series, Genius. He is a two-time DGA Award winner for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film for 1995's Apollo 13 and 2001's A Beautiful Mind, and was nominated for his 1985 feature, Cocoon, and his 2008 feature, Frost Nixon. Mr. Howard currently serves as the second vice president of the Guild and participates on the Eastern Directors Council and the Theatrical Creative Rights Committee. Recently, Mr. Howard sat down with fellow director Jeremy Kagan to share his insights on the directing process in front of a virtual audience. The two discussed building relationships with collaborators, when he knows he's got the right shot, and directing difficult scenes in movies like Cocoon.
My name is Jeremy Kagan, and I am the chairperson of Special Projects for the Directors Guild, and I'm hoping that all of you who are joining us are both safe and somewhat sane in the midst of this. And again, I want to thank specifically, because I know he's in the middle of post-production, doing it via all these devices, Ron Howard. So please welcome Ron Howard to this conversation, The Craft of Ron Howard. Ron, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Jeremy, and anybody who happens to be clicking on. I'm glad to take a little time and be a part of this. And I always learn something through our conversations. So myself.
Well, it's amazing when you just look at all of the work that you've done. I mean, because you've worked in so many different genres, from comedy to serious pieces to historical pieces to biographical pieces to sci-fi pieces. It's amazing in a sense that you are sort of the ultimate craftsperson, because they can turn to you if it's a studio and say, could you do this? Oh, yes, I can make people laugh. Can you take on this very serious biography of a president? Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. So there's so much to share and talk about. But one of the things I wanted to start our conversation with is in terms of relationships, is because, so many of our members are part of the directorial team. I'd like you to talk initially here about your relationship with assistant directors.
Oh, yeah. Interestingly, throughout all of the projects, I primarily have worked with three different first ADs. And so I think that does suggest that I put a lot of weight on that relationship. And I've also found in every instance that if they're part of the filmmaking team, it's not just about logistics. There's also somebody right there that you can turn to and say, does that look right to you? And it's not just, are we going to make our day and when's the cast going to be ready? It's how are we doing? How are we doing today with the movie or the TV show or whatever it might be? And so I've always depended on that combination. I wouldn't say depended on it, but benefited from it and from encouraging it. And of course, I love creating a spirit of collaboration around the process anyway. So, I often have a similar sort of relationship with the DP, production designers, where I'll go outside of their direct area of responsibility and want to just talk about, the day's work, the scenes, the script. So the three guys that I worked with are Jan Lloyd, very different personalities. Jan Lloyd, Aldrich Porter, and Bill Connor. And it's great that you mentioned them, and it's very it means a lot to me actually to go back and sort of analyze that and be able to talk a little bit about them.
Well, to some degree, there are two functions. There's the one which is very practical, which is this is what we've got to get done today. These are the things that we need to have to be able to get done to them. And you've got to tell me, do I have the time to do it? Yeah. And there's also, the responsibility that many first ADs have for taking care of all of the background artists. And, you've had gigantic scenes like, I don't know, the land rush scene in Far Away, or sort of all the background people in things like the Grinch movie. How do you handle those two roles with your assistant director?
Well, again, it gets back to this idea that we're all making a film, and that's certainly a big significant part of it, and a direct area of of responsibility. And I try to pay attention to that. I also have it's a little bit of a deficit for me, because I've always been really an actor's director. And so very often I get into those scenes, whether it's a complicated Steadicam shot or even a wide master, and I get so myopic about paying attention to what's going on between the principals, and are there nuances that I think they're missing, or something that I'm discovering that we can build on, and all that I am not the one to say, hey, that guy in the back took his hat off at exactly the wrong time. And so I really do depend on the first to be thoughtful, and often the first will delegate some of that to a key second, who's also somebody that they trust. But it's certainly a big part of the job. It's I think that cinematographers and first ADs are the two people who work as hard or harder than the director in any given day. And I think the pressure is tremendous, and I respect that, and I appreciate that. But there also always is a kind of an understanding that there are going to be times when we need to invest into this scene, and that's not the AD's responsibility to approve that. But one of the reasons in recent years, and it sort of started with Aldrich Porter, and we've carried this through with Bill Connor, who was actually trained by Aldrich Porter. So there's a real continuity here in the assistant director department in my career, decades long, between the two of them. That they're often I'm fortunate enough to be able to get them to be get it cleared for them to be executive producers as well, which means they get involved early in the project. They carry on into post, and they just have a little additional sort of authority, I suppose, and a range of responsibility, so that as the movie comes together, as the project begins to get up on its feet and we're going, I really love having someone in the trenches with me, dealing with the minute to minute complications of a day, who is connected enough to the project, that has a deeper relationship with the line producer, has been around. We're all a team. And so when you get into these tricky conversations, you really are having a conversation of, how much is this costing us? Where could we make it back if we need to invest in? And all these things on the fly can happen with the first AD that really help the line producer and the director and everybody else down the road. So there's never this lag time. And we're able to be super efficient because the first ADs I work with are brought in a way so that they're privy to everything, and they're a part of that decision-making process.
So if you're walking on the set in the morning, let's say it's not a night sequence,
right.
What's the first dialogue you're having, for example, with your first AD and his or her team to say, this is what the day is going to be, or this is what I'm trying to accomplish?
Well, most of the time, if we're on location, we ride together, and very often the cinematographer as well. And we'll go out of our way to loop around and pick people up and stuff like that. So no matter how groggy they are, I'm usually pretty ampy in the morning. So that conversation has already started, whether they kind of want it or not. But it's it's really what are the goals and what are the variables, and where are the potential landmines here, and so it's keep me informed. I like knowing all of that stuff. I don't like to be hidden from the process. I grew up on sets. I understand all the little wrinkles and pitfalls, and I like to factor them in to the logistical side of what I do. So it really is. It's about identifying like the absolutes. Like these are the things we really must get. And is there anything in the way of that? And so I think those are the conversations.
When there's time pressure, let's say you've been working on a scene, you thought you were going to be able to do this in this certain amount of time, and you feel from the performance you need more.
Right.
This is a double question, because part of the question is, when do you know I've got it?
Right.
But also when you say, I don't have it, and we thought we were going to get it in this time, you have to talk to your AD to say, guess what? So how's that process? There's two parts to it. It's when do you know you have it? And if you don't, and it's much more the time, how will you go through that dialogue?
I'm a bit of a worrier. So with me, there's kind of I see on the horizon, Bill, Aldrich, Jan, whoever, I don't know, but I know, the movie, the show, it needs this. So these are the things I can't compromise. These are the things that I suppose I could compromise. Is it time to start making those moves or not? And in every instance, talking to the people that I've worked with more than once, part of what I love about those relationships that have been important is they are production savvy, and they're responsible to the line producer and to the studio, and we all know that's the job. But they're also filmmakers, and so they'll say maybe not yet. Let's or they'll come up with they might have another fix. And again, I try to build a really good relationship with the first AD, the cinematographer, and myself. So there's a real triangular conversation going on. Often it does start in the car, but even if it doesn't, it starts first thing in the morning. And so it's just a kind of a reading of the day, and what's going on. And, and so usually it's if we're supposed to wrap it at 7:15, we're not discovering this at 7. We've been talking about it since 2. And we know, and we've already realized we're not going to get it. And here's where we can put it in the schedule, or we're not going to get it. We're going to have a real conversation about coming back. Let's get the producers in. This is a real, this is an issue, so that it's rarely that kind of thing. Sometimes it comes down to the do or die shot, with the sun going down, that my brother, longtime character actor Clint, likes to talk about. That's what you really get paid for, is, the sun's coming up and you still have your freaking, you're the character actor who didn't get the coverage until the very last thing. And you've got, they don't have take 2. Can you deliver?
When do you know you've got it? When, now, listen, you've been doing, your body of work is enormous, and it may have changed from, when you were doing, Grand Theft Auto and Splash to when you're doing, the last 3 pictures.
Yes.
There may be a change.
Yeah.
But talk about that, because it's something that every director has to deal with, saying.
Well, I think it depends on the style of the movie. So, I've done, or even the scene. I've done some scenes, for example, Bill Connor and I had a scene with Sal Totino was the DP on Frost Nixon. And we had a lot of scenes where our style of shooting was not really to rehearse. And I mean, because it had been a stage play, I didn't want to over rehearse it. Michael Sheen, who played David Frost, and Frank Langella played Nixon. They had fallen into this pattern doing the play of not communicating with each other off stage. I don't think they actually hated each other, but I also think they probably didn't mind not talking. But they also found it worked. So I borrowed that, and sort of decided to honor that, which also meant I didn't really want to do blocking rehearsals with them. I didn't want Frank Langella, who'd done however many umpteen hundreds of performances, or Michael, to be that racehorse that immediately gets into, the old rhythm by the second or third run through of a scene. So we started shooting right away. I'd never have done anything really like that before or since, but it was a sort of a let the operators discover it and find it. Now, the way I operated there was I had a shot list. It was, in some instances, they were designed shots, like I'd like to start in one place and go to another character and come back through. And if that didn't naturally fall into the sort of the improvised, staging, I would try to nudge it that way at some point or abandon it. But I'd have all of this on paper. And so I would start to know I have it, Jeremy, when I'd be ticking things off. So I'm watching the two monitors, and I'm saying, got that line in and over the shoulder. That happened. Boom. We got that move, that press in on this moment. I can check that one off. So in that case, I'm breaking it down editorially for beats, and I know when I've been able to check off all the beats. And in every instance, by the end of the day, we're doing pickups to sort of nail the last half a dozen things, and we're no longer doing the whole scene, perhaps. So that's different than a day where I know I've got it when, the light was right and the actor, or actress, moved me in the right way or made me laugh or whatever was supposed to happen in the performance. And I see it. And that means we've got it. Sometimes we've got it because we had the big giant crowd and the 6 cameras. And, we did it once. We did it a second time, and everybody's, check. They've kind of gotten what their goals were, and it looked pretty great, and we just know we've got it. So it always depends on the goals of the day. Sometimes you think you got it because we can't come back to this location, and I think we have enough coverage. All right, we got it. We got it because there's no going back.
No, that's convincing yourself you've got it.
Yeah.
But when you have an enormously trying emotional scene, which you've had in many of your movies in terms of an actor's performance, whether the actor is getting to a place of, serious anger. I was thinking on Ransom, there's a moment when Mel Gibson loses it, or serious emotional upset. Where do you go there? Because there's always a range. Do you push it further? Do you, obviously the actor can say, I think I can do this again, but you have to still be able to say at one point, yes, this has affected me.
Yeah. It's a feeling. Sometimes I'll turn to the assistant director. Sometimes I'll turn to the script supervisor. Sometimes I'll check with the DP. Are you feeling this the way I am? And just to because I have a lot of empathy for the actors. So sometimes I'll feel, I'm rooting for them so much that I want to check to make sure that slightly more objective eyes are feeling what I'm feeling. But mostly, I've been thinking about the scene for months or years. And so I feel it. The actor feels it. I try to develop a rapport with the actor so that I do know it. I shoot in different ways, again, depending a little bit on the style of the staging and the approach, the aesthetic we're going for, and also the nature of the actor. So some actors I cover in a way so that there's never the shot. They're just playing the scene, and I'll worry about making sure we got the shot. but we won't discuss it. It won't feel like this is the moment we're doing the close up, or the over the shoulder, or the shot that moves in on you for this, moment in the scene. Some actors flourish that way. Other ones kind of need to know this is it. And it depends on you discover these things in rehearsal. Part of what I use the rehearsal period for is to begin to identify their different, approaches to what they do. Most extreme example of needing to understand that was Cocoon. I was a very young director, but experienced enough. And the four lead males, Wilford Brimley, Don Amici, Jack Gifford, and Hume Cronin, all worked in totally different styles.
Wow.
Totally different styles. And
can you describe?
Wilford Brimley was very was very authentic, very improvisational, and in a great way. And he was gruff, and he was a little difficult to work with at times, and things like that. But he was bringing real honesty to this sort of fantasy comedy, and I loved that. So in rehearsal, they saw that I was going to work with the scenes that way and encourage that sort of thing. Don Amici was old school Hollywood. Here's my text. Where's my mark? Please give me some direction. And within 3 takes, you'll have my performance.
Okay, stop there for 1 second, only because of the word, please give me some direction. Right. When that happens, and obviously what you're making such a powerful point here about different actors need different things, and a director, if is going to be able to, or she's going to be able, they're going to be able to get the performance they want, are going to have to use different methodologies. Right. Do you remember, sort of with Don Amici, the old school, the kind of language that would work? If you said direct me.
Well, I grew up in that language because that's what television was in the 60s. It was the hit your key light, because it was 400 or 500 foot candles, and you could feel it when it hit your face. The rest of the set was 250 foot candles, and you'd kind of know the difference, whether you were on your mark or not. It was whether you could feel that heat on one cheek or the other. So I understood all of that, but he was feeling kind of insecure in rehearsal because I was encouraging this improv, which Hume Cronin could do. And Jack Guilford, as an old sort of vaudevillian, he could roll with it, or he would wait for the opening and throw his scripted line. And his character was written very specifically and very funny anyway. So that was all going well. And Don was feeling a little lost. And Dennis Klein, who was there doing rewrites, he had come from the TV show Mary Hartman, which was 100% improvised. But so he was very helpful in terms of, as during the rehearsal period, just sort of giving me confidence that this approach could work, building sort of around Wilford's gift. And but Don was thrown, and Dennis took to slip, and I said, he's lost here. I know what kind of actor he is. That's, and I described it. And Dennis said, I said, can we help him somehow? And he said, yeah. And he started writing him improvs that we wouldn't tell anybody. And he would just kind of slip Don a line, and Don would say, and just throw it in there. And then all the guys would be going, great line, Don, great, way to go. And so, he felt like he was in the flow, but for him, it was 100% scripted. But I would, you lean certain scenes in certain directions. So, I would let Wilford and his improvs drive a certain scene. Another scene that features Don, I'd slow it down, and we'd make sure we'd get it to work in a way that that allowed him to flourish. That's always what I'm trying to do, is just create the environment where they can excel. You would ask about difficult scenes. One of the really difficult scenes that I ever chose to do, it was a moment with Wilford, who was, as I said, kind of crusty, but underneath it was this drive for authenticity that I really admired and I appreciated. And there was a scene between he and his grandson, and it was supposed to take place in the boy's bedroom. And this is a story about these guys who've been kind of given a second lease on life and fountain of youth in a way, but now they're going to have this opportunity to perhaps go into space and live forever. And he's trying to decide whether to go or not go, and he's decided he will go, but he wants to talk to his grandson. And Wilford came over to me, and we're only 2 days from shooting this scene. And he said, I can sit on the bed with the boy and we can do this 1.5-page scene. You can be done with the whole thing in 1.5 hours. Or we can make a really good scene, a true scene, and we could be fishing. And I said, oh, well, that's kind of, so I went to actually Jan Lloyd and also Richard Zanuck, who was there every day producing, along with his wife, Lily, started to talk about this. And I said, a fishing scene could be pretty great. I don't know how that dialogue works with a fishing scene. I bounced back to Wilford, and because Jan had said, well, I think if we do this on Friday instead of Thursday, let's get some scouts going and we'll see where it would take place and blah, blah, blah. He immediately had a way of moving the board around. And I said to Wilford, I said, well, do you think we would just take the same scene? You feel like that will work out there? And he said, just let me talk to the boy. I'll just talk to the boy. And, you'll get your scene. And I said, oh, you want to improvise? You just want to do it? He said, yeah, I'm just going to talk. I'll just talk. If you let me do it, I'll just talk. So I thought, well, that's, how do we do that? And got with Jan Lloyd, called up Dennis Klein. We were shooting now, so he wasn't around. And I said, what? He wants to improvise it. And he said, well, look, Mary Hartman was a 3-camera show. Get 3 cameras, get your coverage, and see how he goes. So I thought, well, that's kind of bold. Then I went to Wilford and I said, okay, I'll do it. And we're going to do this. Producers are backing me. Jan Lloyd found a place to do it. We'll do it and we'll improvise it. But at some point, I might need you to go back to the scripted scene. And if I do, I just don't want you to put up a fuss. He said, all right, that's fine. That's fine. So then the other thing was he didn't really like coverage. He liked wide shots. I don't know why. He just had it in his head. He didn't really like coverage, which of course I was doing anyway. And it always would rub him a little bit the wrong way. And we would talk about it a little bit, but So I decided, if we improvise this, he's going to run out of gas. So if I want a super wide, 3 cameras. I'm going to want a sort of a full figure. I'm going to want something that ties the boy to him. So those are kind of cross angles and a 2 frontal, 2 shot. And then I'm going to want to get real tight. So he's going to be out of gas on this improv, but he loves wide shots. All right, I'm going to work it the other way around. And I started medium tight, and then I said, we're just going to do I'm going to do a couple of tight shots. I think this is mostly going to play in the wide, Wilford, but we're going to work our way out. So let's just warm up this way. And he did it. It was different every time. We only did 1 take of each size, and took it to the editing room. But I just when he was running out of gas, I said, yeah, but Wilford, we want the big wides. And he said, all right, yeah, we're wide shot. Yeah, great. Right. So we did it, and we did the whole thing in like about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. Beautiful light, one afternoon, kind of on the way back from one location back to the studio. And it wound up being absolutely one of the best scenes that I've ever been involved in. And it scared the crap out of me, but I felt like it was worth a gamble to trust Wilford. And he delivered. Every take was 8 minutes long, but Mike Hill and Dan Hanley, and me spent a great deal of time shaving. And it wound up being a scene that I'm, remain really proud of.
It's a wonderful scene, and there are 2 questions I have about this. One is the phrase that when he would argue with you, I'm using that word, or get gruff. I worked with him. I do know what that gruffness could be like.
Right.
What how you said I need the coverage or I need this close up. What kind of language do you say? I mean, I'm almost trying to I wish I were right there at that moment to be able to hear how you handle it.
It depends. It depends. Sometimes at a certain point, I remember one time he said, why are you doing this coverage? And I said, well, I'm doing it because I want to be able to control the flow of the scene. And, it may be too long. It may not be long enough. And this is going to give, and plus I like faces and, we're getting good wides here and there, but I really want it. And he said, I don't see why you want it. I think, and he says, and by the way, they're not going to let you cut this movie anyway. You're 29 years old. They're not going to let you make this movie. They're going to take it away from you in the editing room. And I said, well, Wilford, first of all, we got to do the coverage. So I really insist. We've got, we're here, we're doing the coverage. And I said, and by the way, that didn't happen to me on Night Shift, didn't happen to me on Splash. I know it could happen to me on this, but I'm willing to bet you $1,000 that it doesn't happen. And he said, all right, that's a bet. So I kind of distracted him away. And by the way, I won the bet. Barry Diller in the studio loved it. They never gave me, it was my cut before I even had final cut. And he paid.
I'm glad you collected.
I got collected.
Here's the other question on that, though, which is the kid.
But it was that was a case of me putting my foot down, and which generally, of course, you don't have to do. But you worked with Wilford, and it's almost part of the game. I mean, now we're spending a lot of time on Cocoon, but he was a psychologically interesting guy. Like one time, to do this one scene, he wasn't really getting upset enough, right? It was a scene where he was supposed to be at the DMV and they were failing him. He couldn't pass his test. Okay. I wanted him to storm off, and he didn't really want to storm off. He was just doing it and kind of walking away. And I kept saying, I really think you should just be pissed off by this, and I'd like to get a take where we do that. And he says, yeah, I mean, he didn't really fight it, but he wasn't really going there, Mm-hmm. And so he hated walkie-talkies. He didn't like the AD calling, we need Wilford, and the PA, the second AD calling the PA on the walkie, Wilford, where is he? And he hated that. He hated walkie-talkies. It was like a big thing for him. So he had to go off and make an exit and to make an entrance. And he came in, and just for that one, I hid the walkie-talkie out of frame, and I had the actor read the off camera for the close shot on the walkie-talkie. And he sort of like tensed up when he saw that I was playing that trick on him, and he totally went with it. And he got so furious, and he stormed out. And then he came back and took the walkie-talkie and like smashed it on the table very theatrically, so he was a bit of a showman about it.
Now, the kid, you've worked with lots of kids, Parenthood. I mean, just to speak, in fact, there's that kid when he loses his mouth brace, whatever it is. There's an amazing moment. The kid in that scene with Wilford,
right?
Since this is an improv scene, what did you tell the kid?
Well, Wilford had a great relationship with him, Oliver, and he. And I said, I'm a little worried that he won't be able to keep up with you. And he said, I'll get him around to his cues. I'll get back to the cues. And he was savvy enough. And he's a brilliant guy, Wilford, and a great actor, and and highly intelligent, and all those things. And he was great with the kid. He got the kid to his cue lines, and the kid and Oliver's smart, and he picked up on it. It made for a great scene.
Yes, it did.
But I would never thrust that on actors. I would have to discover that was something that they kind of had an appetite for, and a few times I've employed that sort of thing, but mostly not. That's not what most actors want to be doing.
One of the things I want to talk about working with kids, but I also want to ask that one more question, which is, sometimes because we want the result, be pissed off. Sometimes we'll say that, and the actor then will interpret that and turn it into, and acting teachers are around the world saying, "Where's your action verb? Where's your action verb?" by being an actor, by working with such brilliant actors, knowing some need different kinds of help to get the best performance, do you find that there is some sort of justification for the idea of saying, attack her, as distinguished from the result of the emotion you want? And you've been directed, you've worked with other directors. Where are you on that kind of language?
Well, I try not to give line readings, but I do sort of improvise and act it out a little bit for them sometimes. I think that could be kind of annoying, so I'm careful about it. Mostly, I try to deputize actors. I try to collaborate with them as much as possible, which means understand, kind of what makes them tick. There are actors who really want to be told, they excellent actors. Just tell me faster, tell me louder. I'll figure it out. There was a great learning moment for me on Parenthood. I was directing Jason Robards Jr. and it was his first day on the film, and it was a difficult scene. It's he has a favored son, Tom Hulse, who's a ne'er-do-well, and scheduling issues being what they sometimes are, kind of the most difficult dramatic scene was the first thing they both had to do. And so in the scene, the father is supposed to recognize once and for all kind of that his son is a fuck up. And we played it, and it was fine. It wasn't getting all the way there, but we sort of started with a master and worked our way in. And it was strong until the end, and I felt like it wasn't really landing. It wasn't as devastating for Robards. And I went to Jason, and I said, here's your son. I know we're jumping to this scene, but as you've championed this guy for, and now he's leaving you with this child. He's abandoning his own son. It's just, and I got about halfway through just sort of talking the situation down and reviewing that. He reached over and grabbed my hand. He said, "Ron, do you want a sadder face?" And I said to myself, "Oh, well, here he is." At that time, I was like 34 years old. He's fucking with the young director. Now he's going to pull a big sad face, and I'll come back, and it'll be a little negotiation, and we'll see where we go. It's my first day of working with him. I didn't know how much I could, how square of a shooter he was, and I said, "Well, maybe, yeah, maybe that's it. Let's try it," because I just didn't want to get into any kind of debate. It was only take two, so I went back, and the moment where he was all in his mind, or he was just making a sadder face, is the moment that's in the movie, and it's heart-wrenching. It's so true. It's so honest. And I felt like, okay, for this guy, 70-year-old lifelong actor, all he wants is the word. He knows where that gear is. And actors find that truth. They know how to access it. And whether it's pretend or whether it's an emotional channel that they can open up, I don't know. It depends on the person, I think. But it was just a great lesson that different people respond in different ways. So I once had an opportunity to ask Mike Nichols, how he rehearsed with actors, and what he looked for. And he said, "Well, I like to try to open up bridges to conversations that I might need to have down the road. I like to understand the relationship that actor has with his or her character. And if I happen to hear a funny story about a crazy mother or a bully who hassled them when they were in elementary school or something, maybe at 3:00 in the morning, I'll be able to come up and say, hey, remember that bully situation? Does that apply here? And open up something for them. I thought that was a great lesson in working with actors, but also, building up an understanding of their psyche, their emotional circumstance, and how it might relate to, to the character and moments that you might be trying to achieve.
And how do you find that out? I understand Nichols' discussion of, I want to know who you are as a human being, and we'll share who we are. And then if there's ways that I can help you by reminding you of who you are, I'm sort of rephrasing it.
I don't think he explained it. I think he would have charming dinners and be Mike Nichols and get people talking. So I think there is if you can have a little hang time, I think that can be valuable, or it could be a direct conversation. Some actors like to be told, most don't, because then things become so mechanical. So I always tread very lightly about that sort of, just sort of directing too much toward a result, unless I begin to see that they're at that place where that's really all they want and they know what to do with it.
That wraps up part 1 of this exclusive discussion with Ron Howard. Stay tuned next week for the conclusion of Mr. Howard's conversation with moderator Jeremy Kagan. If you'd like to hear more from the Craft of the Director series, check out episode 27, which features director David O. Russell discussing his noteworthy filmography. Or check out our YouTube page to find discussions with Leslie Linka Glatter and Guillermo del Toro. Past episodes of The Director's Cut are available wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.